Welcome. I'm Sue Landay. This is Show and Share, and I'm here today with Julia Phelan, and I'm so happy to have you on with us today. Julia comes to us, you can see the palm trees outside her window from Los Angeles. She's the co-founder of a company called 211, which is an innovative education consultancy. And her life's work has been focused on research in education and on the science of how people learn. And so I'm delighted to have you here to share with us some of the science and some of the understanding that you've come to appreciate about neurodivergent learners and how we can help them as trainers. So welcome. If you all want to take yourselves off of mute and say a quick hello on the count of three. One, two. I'm seeing people come off. Three. All right. Hi, Julia.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. I love seeing this. A dog being
Hi.
celebrated for
Hello.
racing in the Olympics made me happy, says Carl. I love that.
All right. So
Hi, everyone. Good
please get
morning.
us started, Julia. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here. And let's while I'm just doing that, I should have done I had this ready a second ago and then I went away from it. So good morning while I just come back to my little
Screen
slideshow.
share your screen share.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, thank you everyone for showing up. Hopefully we can see. Do you see some of my pretty birds?
Don't tell us that's outside your window
Oh
or something like that.
no.
I
No,
will
but I
be really
will.
jealous.
No, but I will say that so I live in Malibu usually, not right now, temporarily, but there's a flock of feral parrots that most days would visit my house. So these are not them, but the feral parrots are green, but there is a weird flock of parrots that flies around and terrorizes Malibu. Yeah, I know. Well, anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for having me. I'm happy to be here. And today, I know we have a brief chat today, but we're going to talk a little bit about, how learning actually happens, or even just how we need to consider that when we are designing learning experiences, not how we wish it happened, but how it does happen, and how we can use that to design and deliver inclusive, equitable learning experiences. And then we're going to talk about a few tips that can help maximize learning for diverse groups of any kind. And my real North Star here is, I guess there's two North Stars on my page here, but when we can truly understand and have knowledge of how people learn, then we're better able to choose, select, leverage the most impactful strategies for meaningful learning and use educational technologies and tools thoughtfully and appropriately. So that's really what I like to think about all the time. People will say to me, like, well, what's the best way to do this? What's the best way to teach that? And, as you all know, it really just depends. And what it depends on is, who we're interacting with, what the context is, and that's really the most important thing. And it's the most important thing when we're thinking about neurodivergent learners or any group, really. And
Mhm.
I show you this not to violate all of the, oh my goodness, like don't give me more than 3 words on a slide rules, but just to understand
It
that.
so blows that away.
Yeah, exactly. So if everybody could read all of this, but so the reason I show this is we think about learning, if we think about learning happening kind of on this central kind of piece of this page, we're taking stuff in from the outside and we're processing it and hopefully we're moving it down into a long-term memory. The reason I show this is that there's a whole bunch of other stuff that can impact that, right? So there's a whole bunch of stuff happening. And when we're thinking about designing learning experiences, these are all the things that we need to be considering. And obviously, I mean, that's a lot of things, but it's important for us to be considering that because when we think about good learning design, we need to think about how learning happens, and that's the learning science piece of that. And then how do we apply and adapt those principles in different contexts? And that's what we call the learning engineering component of that. And it's important. The whole thing is important because when we think about learners and groups of learners, everybody's coming from a different place, right? No one's starting from the same place. Their experiences are different. Their prior knowledge is different. Their emotions are different. Their cognitive strengths are different. And these differences are really, really, really important in all contexts. But I know today we're focusing on neurodiversity. And so when we think about that, a powerful way for us to frame that is through these cognitive processing differences. So variations in how people perceive, process, respond to sensory, cognitive, and emotional stimuli. And if we can be considering that in any context, right? But if we can be considering that when we're thinking about designing learning experiences for neurodivergent learners, then we're going to be able to meet people where they are. And one really important thing, and many of you may be familiar with design principles, universal design principles for learning. And when we think about things like that, the benefit of a lot of adaptations we can make when we're considering any group or a diverse group of learners is that adjustments that we can make for one group tend to benefit everyone. So if we think about maybe putting subtitles on a video during a lecture or something like that, we might do that to accommodate a certain group. But what we end up doing is helping everybody because for a lot of people, it's just helpful to offload some of that to actually be able to read something rather than just be listening to it. So we end up having some benefits for everyone, which I think is a happy outcome. So when we think about neuro include,
I
sorry?
was just going to say it like just seeing that it makes you and putting together a, a learning module, whatever, like you're so focused on the content and then you need to kind of layer on top of that the experience of all of these different people. It is really complex.
For sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that what I like to think about when I think about any kind of learning experience design is I think about a sound mixing board, right? Like if you think about someone in one of those big booths where they've got all these different levers that they're moving up and down. And what you're really trying to think about is, okay, here's what I might sort of typically do now in this particular context with this particular group. Are there things that I need to like nudge up? Are there things I need to nudge down? It's
Mm.
just like when we went to online learning, for example, we needed to think, okay, what are we missing in an online environment that we used to have in an in-person environment? And we can think about those things. And then what do we need to do in this new context to try and address that? What do we need to do? Do we need to just be a little bit more intentional about making connection? But what I think is interesting about that side of things is for some people, they may be thinking, oh, yeah, when I went online, I had to, I lost all this connection. I lost all this ability to, read the room and see everybody, which absolutely is true. And for some learners, it actually was a benefit because they prefer to ask questions in the chat or things like that. And so it's just,
Yeah.
there's a way that you can scaffold learners who are perhaps a little bit more hesitant to interact in a different way. And then my husband teaches at UCLA, and he would see all these students who wouldn't normally be raising their hand, but they were much more willing to be typing questions into the chat. So, you sort of have these pros and cons of all of these different things. So really at the heart of any kind of, when we're thinking about any kind of learning experience design is we have to be considering that we only have a limited capacity in our brain, to be paying attention to what we're supposed to be paying attention to. So there's only so much we could process at the same time.
And it
And
doesn't matter how old you are.
exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Exactly. So I was doing a podcast recently and I was in my husband's office and at UCLA because I wanted to go there because I just wanted it to be a bit quieter and all of that. And while I was doing this podcast interview, somebody was ringing on the doorbell of his office, and it was this really loud, one of those like kind of sing-songy doorbells, that's like ding, 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 ding. And it just kept doing it. And the person was very, very, very persistent. But as soon as that starts happening, then I now part of my brain, right, is over here thinking like, oh my goodness, is this person going to come and knock on the door? Are they going to do it again? All of that, whatever I'm distracted by. Now that piece of my working memory is not focusing on the podcast interview or the questions she's just asked me. And so, I cannot do two things at the same time. So then I'm
Which is
just
the reality in any training environment, right?
exactly,
All right,
exactly.
so what do we do about it?
Exactly.
How
What
do we
do
do
we
this,
do?
Julia?
What do we do about it? So we just have to keep that in mind. The reason I bring up the whole cognitive load, the whole cognitive capacity idea is that we just have to understand that that's an issue. And in particular, when we're thinking about neurodivergent learners, processing differences, they can intensify some of those challenges that everyone is facing, right? But to support that, we've got to take into account how people are experiencing cognitive load, which may be different from a neurotypical learner. And when we think about learning experience design, we've got to think about the learning environment, participation. We can also think about visuals and materials. I'm just going to talk about the first two today since we just have a short time together. But so what are some adjustments, right, that we might need to make in these particular contexts? And if you have an assumption that, okay, you've got a training experience or environment that covers what you want it to cover, it covers the right learning objectives, all of that stuff. Now we've got to think about what other elements of the experience may be influencing people. What adjustments do we need to make so we can hopefully reduce that unproductive cognitive effort while addressing those specific needs of those learners? And I think the really important thing here is everybody has to do this at the beginning or right now, but flexibility, right? Like flexibility is key, is not thinking, okay, this is the way we always do things, thinking, okay, how can we, going back to our little sound mixing board, how can we be more flexible? Okay, so when we think about the learning environment, one thing we can do is we can start out with a calming exercise of some kind. It doesn't necessarily need to be pretty sound bowls and lavender and little bells or whatever I have there, but some sort of calming exercise that can help set the stage for learning and even give people just a little bit of time to settle in, a little bit of time to just kind of, decompress from whatever's been happening outside of that training environment. They're coming in, just a little time, just take a beat to just relax, settle in a little bit. Another thing to consider is what you're saying and how you're saying it. So being careful with your words. So if you start out a training saying, hey, okay, everyone, this stuff should be really easy for you guys, or it won't take long for you to grasp these ideas or something like that, or this shouldn't take very long, then that can really strike up some serious anxiety or overwhelm if the person who's on the receiving end of that is thinking like, well, I don't know if I am going to find this easy, or I already am not thinking this is going to be particularly easy, then again, when we think about what we're thinking about or what's in our brains, now I'm distracted by that because I'm worried that, oh gosh, everybody else is going to think this is really easy and I don't really think I am, or I'm concerned about that. So just not making assumptions about how others will receive what you're about to say, I think is a really important piece of it.
Can I jump in and ask a question about that,
Yeah,
Julie?
yeah.
Because I feel like, and I don't know where I read this, but there was some brain research that, or learning research, I thought, that if people go into a task thinking that it's doable and conquerable and easy, or maybe it's not easy, maybe it's like that the language needs more nuance, but that they are more successful than people who go in and are told, this is impossible, you're never going to get it. Have you heard, am I making that up? I don't think I am, but
Well, I mean, I think the critical element of that is that you'd have to know what the background knowledge, prior knowledge of the people that you're talking to is, right? So, I mean, one big element of motivation is that something has to feel doable, so to the learner. But again, that's a very personal thing. So, if somebody walks into an environment and they've got it in their head that they're not a math person or something like that, or
Mm.
they've always had difficulty with math, and then now they're in a math environment, then that's likely to strike up some sort of fear in them, or make them feel like, I don't know if I'm even going to try this because my past experiences told me that I'm not really that great at this.
And
I
maybe
think,
there's an in between there where you're not saying this is easy, but you guys can do this, right? Like you've, right? Like kind of
yeah,
finding that
I mean, there's a
nuance.
motivational element to that, right? Again,
Yeah.
to sort of, but again, I think it's with any learning environment, it's about setting up the right expectation and setting up
Mm,
the right scaffolding. And so saying, because what you don't want to do is tell somebody, okay, yeah, you can do this. This is really easy, and then it isn't, but there are other ways that you can help people. You can scaffold something in such a way that you can support people as they're learning it
mm.
without, setting an unrealistic expectation. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Didn't mean to
No, no, no,
divert.
no, it's a great, it's a great question. And I think it's one of those million-dollar questions too, because at the end of the day, we just have to consider where people are when they're starting,
Yeah,
and everyone's coming from a different place. So,
for
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So again, thinking about the environment that we're in and the actual sort of physical environment, another thing that can be really useful is to give people some choices. Again, so thinking back to being flexible. So are there choices that you can offer people in terms of where they're going to sit or if they're going to sit, right? And then if you have, let's say you have a training environment where you're going to have people working in small groups, perhaps consider setting up the tables and the chairs in the small group arrangements ahead of time and not having lots of, okay, moving chairs and you're getting up and reorienting. So allowing people to establish themselves in a particular space and then leaving it like that, and just like letting
Mhm.
it be that. And then if you can, and again, this all is so dependent on, what is happening in the room, what type of learning is going on. But if it's possible to have people, like right now, I'm standing up here at my desk. So, people having people to stand up or being able to walk around, and perhaps you direct them to a certain area of the room. Maybe it's in the back, so it's a little less distracting to other people. Again, you've got to consider all of the people. What can be distracting to somebody might be, another person pacing up and down behind them, whereas the other person like really needs to walk and cannot sit still for very long. So it's trying to think, how can you create an environment where both of those things can exist without
Mm.
one overly influencing the other one?
And
Right.
Lisa
Yeah.
said, just shared a thought also
Yeah.
in the
Well,
chat.
I
Um,
don't have the chat showing. Can you
okay.
tell me what? Yeah.
Yeah, so that in her military and veteran students who have PTSD prefer sitting against the back wall, and some faculty don't allow them to. And so,
Mhm.
Lisa, thank you. That's a really nice example of,
Yeah.
trying to be more accommodating.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah. And again, I think that all of those, something like that is perhaps the person hasn't thought about that. And so it's then some sort of conversation about that might just increase people's awareness of, okay, yeah, I've never thought that was something that I needed to think about. Now I can add that to my repertoire, or add that to the things that I'm thinking about. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And then another one is, if you feel comfortable, if it's appropriate, if all of those things, asking people to wear like muted colors or avoiding bold patterns and distracting details on whatever they're wearing. So again, to help people if there's any kind of sensory overload that might be happening, to try and again, mitigate that in some way. And then when we think about
Can I
sensory,
just jump in one more time?
yeah.
Sorry. Because one of the things that I asked you as we were talking ahead of time about this, which I was also thinking about the calming a calming environment
Uh-huh.
and muted colors, and is finding that balance between sort of that calm and energizing and kind of
Mhm.
keeping things moving and changing and engaging, that the brain also for many people needs those differences, and how you think about balancing that.
Yeah. And again, I mean, I think back to the previous thing. I mean, I think it's just, yeah, it's a challenge to try and you know, create a learning experience and a learning environment that's going to be, okay for all of those things. I do think, though, when we think about the term active learning, right, that I think a lot of
Mm,
times people think active learning means like everyone has to hop up and down and run around the room and change seats and do a bunch of stuff. But really, when we think about active learning, it's like this is what's being activated is in your head.
mm.
Like you're doing something that is helping people to process something in a meaningful way. So that can be done in all manner of ways. It's
And
not
even maybe giving people agency to choose
100%.
what works for them.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we'll get to the choices and piece in a second, but absolutely that in any situation, if possible, choice is always going to be a great choice,
Yeah.
to make. And what I like to think about is if you have your sort of North Star here of, okay, what is it that I want someone to learn? Right? That's what you've decided. And now think about, okay, are there ways that I can give people options and choices of how to get there? And, as long as I am staying true to that thing that I want them to learn, then okay, if they get there by writing an essay, if they get there by giving a presentation, if they get there by creating a piece of art, if I can justify all of those things, then absolutely
Mm,
agency and choice is excellent. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, just thinking a little bit about sensory sensitivities, there can be things to do here, like, allowing folks to wear noise reducing headphones that can help get rid of, some of the background noise that may be happening. There's another option. Oh, sorry.
Speaking of which, I'm trying to
Speaking of
I
that,
think I
um,
got it. I'm sorry about
okay.
that.
Oh, no worries. See, now that's a perfect example, right? Then I'm distracted by that. But
Of
giving
course.
access to something to hold, to touch, like a stress ball or another object that can be again manipulated in a way that is not distracting to other people. Lighting is another big one, when just harsh or flickering lighting or anything that is like, causing a lot of like difference, like on and off, on and off, on and off. So if you can choose a lighting scheme for whatever you're doing and just keep it like that. And then, minimizing background noise can also be useful. And that might mean, okay, normally I might have some music playing or something, and maybe I'm not going to choose to do that, or I'm going to just have that be a slightly, calmer or more relaxing type of music that I may decide to play in my learning experience. And another thing that can be helpful, and again, this is one of those things that can be helpful for everyone, right? So when you're trying to pay attention to something, maybe you're taking notes, but it's difficult sometimes to pay attention to somebody who's talking and then writing down notes, and it can be difficult to engage in both. So, maybe if you can record something and then allow people to revisit that later, that can be beneficial again for everyone, but it can be extra beneficial to somebody who might just benefit from revisiting that,
Hmm.
whatever they've been learning, revisit it again and process it again. So when we think about participation, right? So participation opportunities, and this I think gets to what you were talking about too a little bit, Susan, like how can we get people, engaging in what we're doing? One thing is, and again, this goes back to our setting expectations, is sending things around ahead of time. So sending around materials, agendas, whatever it might be, something that's describing what the learners are going to actually be doing, can help them set expectations. It can highlight any kind of sensory or social demands that may be present. There may be something described as, okay, then we're going to do this big group activity, and then person at least can think, okay, is that something that I feel comfortable engaging with? And at least I know ahead of time that it's
Mhm.
coming, and I know like I've already spoken to somebody about that, or but it's not a surprise. Everyone's like, okay, everyone stand up and go find a friend and do something, that you have some idea about what's happening. And then there are some options, right? Just like we talked about, options to opt in, or maybe choose some alternative type of activity that would still achieve the same goal, again, which I think is really a crucial thing. So when we think about choices, it's good to have choices, but we don't have too many choices sometimes, because too many choices can be overwhelming. Like, what on earth is this poor young man going to choose as his drink at this giant vending machine? Um, so when we think about choices, let's think about like introductions. So some folks might not feel comfortable like standing up or even just saying, hi, my name is so and so, here's where I'm from, or whatever has been asked for them. So, giving some options about that. Maybe there's a whiteboard at the back of the room, or there are some post-its or something where people can, write down who they are, what their name is. Some people might not want to raise their hand, right, and contribute to a discussion. Others might prefer
Mhm.
maybe addressing some questions in a small group, or maybe submitting, like I said earlier, like submitting a question or a comment on a chat feature or online discussion board, putting a sticky note on the wall, but having some choices for folks so they can still be participating, but also, participating in a way that makes sense for them. For some
Mhm.
folks too, this goes back to, when you can get the agenda ahead of time for something that, we're not all able to just respond like in the minute, when someone asks something. Like sometimes, and I think and again, this is probably a good practice for most of us, just maybe take a second to think about something, or take a second to think about, a question, what would be a good response to that? Or maybe a meeting or a training session is going to be eliciting some ideas or suggestions, or there's going to be some other contribution that perhaps requires, just a little bit more thought, that it won't pop into your head immediately, but if you had a little bit of time to think about it, then maybe you would come up with something. So there can be some benefits just to, knowing what some of these things are ahead of time and having a little time to think about it.
I realize I asked a lot of questions. We're coming up on half past. I don't recall how many more slides you have.
We're almost there. We're almost done. Yeah.
Okay. I
So
just
I was
wanted,
just going to say, some people might be too overwhelmed with too many choices. So again, this is where there's that balance, right? That having some choices, some folks might prefer, okay, this is too overwhelming to me. I don't know what all these choices are. I'd like some more specific suggestions and guidelines. And then the final thing was really around time. So just adjusting time as necessary, time for questions, as I just mentioned, pacing, content if you can, and then in some cases, a more self-paced virtual option might be more appropriate if that's feasible.
so,
And
and speaking of questions,
yeah,
um, so Nicholas is asking in the chat, and you can also feel free to unmute Nicholas, but does anyone have experience with neurodivergent learners submitting their preferences beforehand so that they can be accommodated, whether it's physical disabilities, ASL translator, etc.?
Yeah, we're
yeah,
always we're very for our classes, we're very proactive, and does anybody need any accommodations aimed at physical disabilities? But we don't do a good job in inviting feedback regarding neurodivergent issues. And I've never seen anybody request some kind of accommodation for neurodivergence. And I was wondering if anybody's ever received that and what that looked like.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, Nicholas, because I think that's exactly right. That there's a big divide there between the things that are. I've seen it in the workplace, for workplace, like certain types of desk placement and things like that, or being somewhere that's quieter in the corner, or having some you know headphone wearing policy and things like that, but not so much in a classroom context.
Tolu has said that she puts a question on her pre-workshop survey that says, "Please describe any access needs you
Hmm.
have."
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
That's a
Yeah.
nice solution, Tolu. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, that is great. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love and I love the idea of that. The pre-survey, I think is excellent. Yeah.
Yeah.
When somebody says they had a person ask for a fidget during a workshop. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did add a couple of links earlier in the chat to an array of fidget toys, as well as a blog post that we put together at one point on different tools that may accommodate different tactile needs and
Hmm.
visual needs and sound needs. And so those might be of use as well.
So Lisa says something. I think this is interesting, Lisa. So PowerPoint slides provided prior to lectures, and I know some professors just really don't like to do that because they feel that it doesn't encourage people to take notes, and encourages people to just kind of sit there and think, okay, well, I have the thing. So,
Heard it
yeah,
all, seen it all.
right, right, right. So, maybe there's a balance there of having something that doesn't have everything on it, but it's a scaffolded type of sheet where they could be supported to add some notes or something like that. Yeah.
Julia, this has been great. I think we still have some more questions
Yeah,
as
yeah.
we'll leave the time open a little bit. But I'm also sort of reflecting on just the beginning and of appreciating cognitive load. And I'm remembering the cognitive load that you told me about when we were first prepping for this about competing in a bartender Olympics and the cognitive overload that you must have had just to be able to do that, which I think is a really fun thing. Um,
Yeah, that was definitely, I think that thinking back to that, yeah, there was so many elements of that because there was so many ways that you're being evaluated for, like the accuracy and knowing the recipes of different things and then doing a little routine and all of that. Yeah, yeah.
it's not so different from where we are right now, is it? It all kind of
Right.
comes together.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. I love
Um,
that the participant, someone Mary says, yeah, key slides, participant manual helps the learners get the information. And I think another thing, and somebody else had popped into the chat there, that when you would hope, I think, that if you had a slide deck that you just gave to somebody, that it wouldn't be enough, right? If you've done it hopefully right, that otherwise, why do you even have the person doing it? So you don't, there's all the other stuff and the context that they are giving. So, maybe in a slide situation, if they have that basic frame, then they can write the notes of, what the person's actually
right.
saying or the color they're adding to it. Yeah.
It's like it's the teaser. It's not the book,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
not the textbook with all of the information in it.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
pictures. Yeah.
But yeah, and the agenda, I think, yeah, and being prepared. Another thing I think that can be really useful there is, again, depending on the context, is having an outline on a board that stays there. That so oftentimes you'll have an outline at the beginning of a presentation that you might say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have this, 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 and this. But then you quickly move away from that. And now you've moved on to your next slide. But if you could have it on another thing, like on another whiteboard or something else, then as you're going through it, people can keep looking back at that and thinking, oh, okay, we're halfway through this. Or, it's like when you're watching a movie and you pause it because you want to know, like, well, where are we? How much more of this do we have? Is it is it good
Been
or
there.
bad? Right, right, right.
Nikki, can you unmute and say a little bit more about the stickers that you might create?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm muted because I'm busy cooking tea. Because it's 5 o'clock here in the UK. So basically what I do is predominantly management and leadership development. I actually give them a blank notebook and then I print out stickers, kind of A65 of the main models that I might use. So I don't know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is one that always tends to crop up. So that would be a sticker. So they can
Uh-huh.
place it in their book, they can write their own notes. So they're not missing out on the main information, but they've got the space to create their own handout.
Ah,
And I find that engages people an awful lot more than just giving them a handout.
yeah. I love that.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
so
so it's a
fun. And
big, so
it's
it's a big
so
sticker.
tactile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
And it
like
gives
that.
people something to do as well, rather than, just writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
Awesome.
that. It's great.
Thank you. Any other resources or tips or tricks from the folks who are with us today? I feel like all of you often have lots of experience to share as well.
I love that. Lisa says no surprises.
Hmm. The
Yeah.
whiteboard idea for the agenda. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it works really well that, yeah. Just to keep people, yeah. And then they know what's coming too. Yeah. Know where they are. It's like a book, sometimes in books, textbooks, I think mostly they'll have a little kind of thing at the bottom. It's like almost like a little breadcrumb that you can like follow, you could see, okay, I'm halfway through this chapter. Yeah. Again, expectation. Yeah.
Well, I know that we've gone over our half-hour mark, and I just will stay on for a bit in case there's any other chat or comments or networking that folks want to do. But Julia, let me just say a deep thanks to you for your insight and sharing your wisdom and experience and suggestions. It's awesome. It's
Well,
great and
thank you for having me. What
terrific reminders.
a delightful morning start to the day.
Awesome. Yes, we started off asking folks what's given them a smile today, and you've given me a smile. So thank you.
Same. Ditto. Thank you, everyone, for your great questions and comments. Really appreciate that.